What I mean by that, I am a product of the South Side of Chicago, and typically when we look at an urban area like Chicago and all the typical challenges that the young folks deal with, whether you're talking about poverty, we talk about school systems that are strained for resources, which puts pretty immense pressure on teachers to be able to get information in front of students. You have students who are maybe not having basic needs met, different family structures. Sometimes there's a sense of violence in the community, which actually has an impact on the way young folks perceive themselves. If you add all those things up, that was me. And I am from a family where I have an older brother right now who is serving 285 years in prison. I have a younger brother who was released from prison a few years ago. My older sister was released from jail a couple of years ago. My father's a guy they call Smoke on the south side of Chicago. Some guys put a hit out on him when I was 8 years old. So he left and went to Michigan, which essentially put my mother in a typical situation where she was a single parent, raising up a family. And when you consider just those different stresses, those different pressures, that stress effectively took her out a couple of years ago. We lost her due to cancer and other complications. And when you consider sort of that slice of my story, if you fast forward ever so slightly, I am number 48 in American history. I'm the 48th African American male that is licensed to operate military nuclear reactors as well as commercial nuclear reactors. And I'm also the guy that licenses others to operate nuclear reactors. In short, I am a bona fide nerd. You do not split the atom unless I determine that you have enough knowledge to split the atom. And I've had this credential since I was 19 years old. But the overall question becomes the how. How do you take a young person where they have those same challenges that probably many of your students and a lot of community members have, but what happened that allowed me to move beyond the internal challenges within the family, the struggles within the community, and then my own personal demons of having the psychological impacts of that. How did I get to the point where at such an early age I was able to perform at a high level? And that question had to be answered because one thing I knew was that was not something special. It's not something that's unique to me. It's more so who I am today. I had always been that person. So I was Deon Clark, the person who eventually would be able to operate nuclear reactors, even back when I was a teenager. The difference is I had not met enough people, I had not been in enough programs who can strip back the challenges so that I could actually grow into who I've become. Meaning, I always was this kid. It took a series of people, a series of programs in order to pull it out of me, but I was always that kid. And that was the premise for which when we built the legacy model, the premise was so many of these young people have the potential. It's the stuff that's on the surface is what we have to be able to pull through in order to see exactly who these young folks are. And the how to do that is the entire intent behind this model. So as I walk you guys through this and we kind of explore it, this is why it was so important to not look at it through the lens of a program, but really look at it through the lens of an actual model, because it is not specific to an industry. It has no specific it's not specific to any particular school, any particular region. It's a process. And if the process is followed, we can produce the same results over and over again. So when we started the model, it was built for the industry. So for all my educators in the room, we did not build this model for educators. What we knew was that if we build it for the industry, education would benefit, because the more we can get employers invested, it just does nothing but positive things for the school systems and those students who are a part of it. But we had to build it for the industry, because if the industry is engaged and we make a strong case to them and get their engagement, funding no longer becomes an issue, resources no longer becomes an issue. wondering whether or not there's going to be jobs on the back end of a student's commitment will no longer be an issue because the employer are invested on the front end. So with that, we had to take some time and actually take a look at what exactly were the issues that the employers were facing. And you all see this next slide advance. There were three major areas that we found employers to have been struggling with. And we wanted to classify this because a big part of bringing in more diverse talent from the school systems into the workforce, it's centered around the employer's ability to recognize what is their role and what is their area of struggle. And when we talk about diversity broadly, it's such a big topic, it's such an intimidating topic. It's very difficult to make progress on it because there's varying views on what diversity means and how to tackle it. What we looked to do was to make this a little bit more digestible conversation by grouping the major issues that the employers have and then putting a solution to those three issues. What you see up on the screen are the three issues that we've identified. Number one is you have employers who are genuinely unable to locate the talent. Meaning they're actively looking. They're looking to bring those young folks in, but they just have not put systems in place to be able to attract and find where's that talent at. And so that's a relatively simple solution where it's a matter of connecting the employers to you guys as the educators and also some of the different community groups who have access to potential candidates. But that's one of the issues that we found employers have. The second one here is a bit more daunting. It's the talent does not exist. This one hits home when we look at our school systems on how many of these young folks are actually aware of and are pursuing some of the opportunities that employers have. And are they taking advantage of everything that you guys have for them at those secondary and post-secondary institutions to actually prepare them to be qualified candidates? There are many employers where it's not a matter of them wanting to bring talent in. It's an issue of not enough young people are even taking an interest. And I'll give you all a very specific example. In Arizona, where we did the model for Arizona Public Service and the Palo Verde Nuclear Station, and I'm going to give you guys arbitrary numbers just to not disclose their specific analytics. But when I was brought down from Chicago, we needed to bring more females into the engineering ranks, specifically electrical engineers. And we had a goal, I'll make up a number 15, that in order for us to be in compliance, we needed to have 15 female engineers in that particular year. And what I did was went to all of the universities that we recruited from. And when we took a look at the number of young women who came into the specific engineering program that they hired for, and how many of them completed their bachelor's degree within 5 years, there were not 15. And this was a real eye-opener for the employer, was that they were chasing ghosts. There were not enough young women who were even interested in doing engineering, meaning it's not possible for the employer to bring them in. And that kind of set us up for, we need to create some system of how do we get young folks to be aware that these opportunities exist, and then giving them the blueprint of exactly what they would need to do in order to be eligible for the opportunities. So this second challenge here, this is a big one for many employers, and either their industry is not attractive enough, enough young people just don't know. Sometimes even us as educators may not have enough knowledge on what these opportunities are, so it doesn't get to the student. Then you have this last challenge. This one is very problematic. I am in Minnesota currently, and here in Minnesota, we have the largest racial disparity gap in the nation. And there's a significant effort around how do we ensure that we bring everybody to the table. Number three is an issue where we may have the talent, we may have some of your young folks who want to do certain professions, but something happens during the hiring process where individuals bring their biases to the fold, and you now may end up having good candidates not get in. Meaning the impact of that, even from an academic standpoint, but students don't believe these opportunities are for them, it kind of takes away the incentive for them to strive and push hard if they don't necessarily see what the outcome could potentially be. So we knew this is another issue that some employers have is, though that the company as a whole wants to bring in more talent, we may have issues at the localized hiring level where individuals may have different biases that are preventing this talent from getting in. So our job was to look at these three major issues and help companies to realize if they cannot bring in the young talent, one or some combination of these three, but we also need to put a solution in place that allows us to address all three of those particular challenges. I adapted this slide directly from one of the presentations CEWD did, where it's showing how our side and our responsibility of preparing the students, making sure they're educated and ready to enter the job market, this has to be directly aligned with the employer's efforts of recruitment, hiring, and retention. If these two align, meaning what we do at the education, whether it's secondary or post-secondary, it does not matter if we do our job correctly on this side of it. If on the employer side, they're not ready or they haven't put practices in place, we'll lose this talent. Likewise, if the employers are ready, they have their systems prepared, they're ready to bring new talent in, but we on the academic challenge of, we may lose our ability to bring this talent into the workforce. So this alignment has to take place. It all kind of wraps up into the concept of what is this ideal candidate? And I'll go back to the story I shared about myself where if a company were looking for an ideal candidate, I was that ideal candidate. When you consider that I met their requirements, I was confident and trainable, meaning I did not have to have every single skill necessary to do the job, but I had enough core competency that I could be taught the specifics of any given job. Being able to adapt to the organizational culture while bringing in my own perspectives, and the fact that I was a local candidate. I represented the areas for which these organizations did business. That set me up as the ideal candidate. It is no different than the students that many of you all are working with. We know they're ideal candidates. It may be a disconnect between what you know and what the employer knows, but we have to be able to identify these four areas and let employers know that these students actually can become those ideal candidates. The challenge is how do we make the ideal candidate? And we're getting to the point of how the model comes into play and really the impact on the educational system. There are 5 components for us to create an ideal candidate. And again, it does not matter where these kids come from. It does not matter if they're affluent, if they're in poverty, if they're Black, white, Hispanic, Native American. It does not matter. If everyone that's in the room listening to the presentation now considers how you got to the position that you're in now, if you actually put some thought into it, you will see that these 5 areas that we're going to briefly talk about, you have them. It may have come in some different form, but there's no way that you're sitting there in your current position if you did not have exposure to that opportunity. You have to know it exists in order for you to strive toward it, meaning everyone in this room is knowledgeable about the career path that you chose. If you look at the second component here, the motivation, you have to be in a position where you actually want to do the things that you're pursuing. And that's so important because there are times where we may not necessarily like our colleagues. You may have somebody that you're sitting next to now that you do not like. Don't tell them that, but you might not like them. But you still show up. You may have problems with your supervisor. You may not like your work hours, yet you still show up to work every day because there's a deeper reason for you. There's a deeper purpose as to why you consistently overcome whatever challenges you have to keep showing up. This is that intrinsic motivation. Every one of us has it. Every one of the students that we work with is going to need to have this as well. When we look at this third, the support system, it is not possible for a human being on earth to function without a support system. And I say that because every one of us stumbles. Each of us has times where it's a rough day, we kind of fall. And had there not been someone, whether it's a family member, a friend, your belief system, your community, co-workers, somehow there's a system of support that allows you to get back up and go at it one more time. Every one of us in the room has some sort of a support system. Every one of these young folks would need a support system in order for them to get through those tough times. When we look at this next component, the training, both from a personal standpoint and professional standpoint, to be able to get into a position, you simply have to meet the minimum requirements. That's just non-negotiable in the new world of lawsuits and discrimination lawsuits. When you consider HR departments, they do not take the risk of bringing someone in who may not meet minimum requirements and then turning someone away who actually did. That's not survivable from a legal standpoint, so companies do a very good job of being able to vet out, do you actually meet the minimum requirements for the job? So we know the students have to have that training to meet those minimums, but we also know that one of the biggest gaps that employers have identified is that the technical side of training is not the difficult part for them, it's the basic skills. Do the young folks have the desire? Will they show up to work on time? Are they going to try to become the CEO after their second year on the job? Or do they have the ability to realize, learn your trade, perfect your trade, and then move up? So they have to have those elements in order to be successful. No different than those of us who are listening to this. Each of us have to have these same things. The last one, the access to the opportunity, is pretty elusive. I'll give another very specific example so that this is not vague. In Arizona, for an individual to be considered a candidate at the nuclear plant, you had to do an online profile, which is typical across many employers now. But in that online profile, we required you to upload 3 documents: your cover letter, a resume, and either your official or unofficial transcript. You can only upload PDF. The LMS system that we had only allowed you to upload 1 document, meaning if you did not know how to merge PDF documents, you would not be able to properly put together an online profile. And I cannot tell you all how many applicants, when we pulled them up through the system and we saw that they only had 1 of the 3 required documents, we threw their application to the garbage pile. And our logic was, if you cannot follow the simple instructions of uploading the required documents, why would we even consider you as a hire? We didn't capture the fact that so many people simply did not know how to merge PDF documents. I venture to say that probably half the people in the room right now do not know how to merge PDF documents. It's not one of those commonplace skills, and so everyone who didn't know that never actually had access to our opportunity. They had the illusion that they had access because they knew we had jobs, but they didn't really have access because they were not aware of the nuances. So when we consider these 5 components, each of us who are here today, in our own way, we've had these 5 components for us to be in our position that we're in now. If we give these components to our young people, it does not matter what their pursuit is, where they're from, they will achieve everything that we've achieved. And the reality is they can probably do it quicker than we did, and they'll probably do it better, just due to the sheer access of information they have. The challenge became, how do you do all those 5 components? Who can do that? And what we found is that there is no singular entity that's able to give those young folks all 5 of those things, or help them with it. It's an effort that requires multiple sectors to actually work in concert in order to be able to do what we just talked about. So if you look at this slide, and it's kind of busy. I'm not sure how well you all can see it. I have another one. The next slide's a little bit cleaner. But this is important for you to take a look at. We knew post-secondary institutions would have to be a part of this. The secondary schools would need to be a part. The businesses have a pretty critical role. State and local government agencies, as well as the community support agencies. Each entity has certain things they do extremely well. And if we go back to these 5 areas, collectively, those entities are able to provide all of these particular resources that we know a student may need. But no one of them can do it. So the challenge became, how do we bring these institutes together, show them their specific function, get agreement to each person that's kind of stay in their lane, and then to synchronize the efforts. Because if we could do this successfully, we would be able to sort of wrap around the student, as this drawing kind of indicates, where no one of us has the burden of trying to do everything for a student. We do the parts that we do extremely well, and then we leverage our partners to do the other things. And I'll give you a general example. When we looked at the United Way, and if I have any United Way folks in the room, this is not a hit against you. Just using this as an example. Never once have I been where the utility industries, specifically nuclear, even natural gas, when they were looking for engineers, they were looking for operators, some of their technical fields, they never once considered the United Way as a source of drawing in that talent. Because their perception of the United Way was it's more philanthropic, but it didn't have a direct role in them bringing in high-skilled talent. The problem with that logic is that in order for us to bring in that high-skilled talent, many of these students have to be made whole, as well as their family, or else the student is not going to participate in after-school activities. They're not going to be focused during the school day if they have basic needs being unmet. United Way does a phenomenal job of making people and families whole. Meaning, if I have a student who has the potential to do something that they're wanting to do, but I as a school am limited in my resources, but if the United Way is partnered with them, the United Way can step in and provide that student with those basic needs resources and provide those parents of that student with what they need, which will allow that student to focus now when he's in my classroom. If that student focuses while they're in my classroom, there's a much better chance they'll get the grades they need to be able to get into the post-secondary schools so that they can meet my minimum requirement. Meaning, the United Way is a critical part of this, though it may not seem like it on the surface. So when we bring the model together, our job was to show everyone how everyone does have a role, and all of our work is contingent upon the others. It's just we have to know that and be intentional about how we synchronize our efforts so that we're not working in silos. For us, the proof was, did we have the ability to put a young person into one of the most difficult positions you can get in, which was nuclear operations at a nuclear station. And to add to that, we're going to take a kid from a single family home in Phoenix, Arizona, who was undocumented. And that on the surface seems like, well, that's not going to be possible. And that's correct if we as Legacy try to do it ourselves. But when we looked at all our partners and the fact that the industry was involved, we were able to work with that student within their school, multiple students, but this one in particular, make sure they had everything they needed such that they actually were selected. They were considered the best candidate at the nuclear station, and they were extended an offer. And for those in the utility industry, I do not need to remind you of what type of money we're talking about for a kid to be brought in to the nuclear station. It's a life-changing event. And it was directly tied to the fact that each of us understood our role and we worked together to do it. The hardest part about it is the coordination, which is what my organization focuses on, is making sure that the organization takes place, making sure that it's streamlined. This gives you all just a more simplified look at it, what the model really is in a more clean version. It's simply us taking all of our resources and streamlining them so that we can actually do what it is that we're here to do and not necessarily be burdened by issues that someone else does a better job of focusing on. But the next phase of this, and this becomes the million-dollar question, is once everyone does their part, all of our partners are in place, there is still the element of the student having to make the conscious decision that they're going to actually do their best. And this is the part where the first 100 hours or so of training, it is behavior modification. And this may sound like a bad word, so I'm cautious how I use it, especially my educators in the room. But I'm calling it behavior modification simply because so many of the young folks that we deal with, they're living in poverty. And some of us in the is when you genuinely don't have your basic needs met. If this does not apply, I can tell you very comfortably, You cannot understand it if you genuinely have never had needs go unmet. It is hard for me to believe that anybody in this room has always had their needs met all the time. I don't believe that that's possible, meaning every one of us can probably go back and think about times where there was something that was void and how difficult it was to focus on the things we needed to be focused with when you had another aspect of your life that was sort of in disarray. We know so many of these young folks, especially in your urban core, and then your rural parts of America where it looks completely different, rural versus urban, but the issues are the same. You have so many people fighting for jobs. You have families that are kind of stretched to the limits. You have resources that do not exist. It may look less of an issue in the rural part because you may not have the vibes, you may not have the optics, but the impacts are the same. And so part of the model was to not simply focus on get good grades, get a good job. It was the psychological side of how come a student who has all the potential in the world, who has all the abilities, why would they not perform at their highest level? And it gets back to what I shared about myself. It was never a question of can I do it? Where I am today is proof that I always had the ability. It's are there enough people that I'll come in contact with? Is the process set up that you all can strip away the nonsense so I can actually get to who I'm supposed to become? This part, the character development part, the behavior modification part, this is a signature piece of this model. And I can tell you all with the utmost confidence, whatever programs we are running, if we have not accounted for the true psychological impact of the young folks, the program will not be successful. It is the concept that if you build the house, they will come. There's evidence all over that programs exist, opportunities exist, yet somehow we have too many young folks who still don't take advantage of it. And we have to kind of dig deep to understand why do they not see what we see. I like to use this example of if I'm preparing a meal for 3 classes of individuals, if I'm preparing it for wealthy folks concern themselves with the optics, the visual presentation, with the clarity of the crystal, what's the placement, settings, does everything look a certain way. Middle class folks are concerned with quality. Is it gluten-free? Where did the pig come from? Is it going to make my family fat? Low income and folks that are in poverty are only concerned with quantity. Is it simply enough? And I use this analogy because if you consider the perspective with which young folks see the world, a young person who sees the world through the eyes of someone who may eat once a day, they're not looking beyond that moment. And it's not because they're not capable, it's not because they're not good students. It's a reality that they may not eat later on today, meaning they're trying to figure out what can they do right now to secure dinner for tonight. Your geometry may not come into play. Learning about Christopher Columbus may not be important at that moment because they're consumed with what they consider to be important, which is I need to make sure I eat. Now, if you know that you're going to eat, this is not even, it never even crosses your mind. It's not even something that you wondered about because that basic need is there, meaning you can now focus your attention on something else. Part of the model is to help students to be able to reconcile whatever their situation is, and we literally have to teach them how to manage that. Because though we know that some of them are in dire straits, it also serves as no excuse for them not to perform. It's teaching them how to perform given those circumstances. And that is difficult, you guys. To teach a young person how to put aside family issues and focus on school, it is no different than us being asked to not worry about the fact that we're about to lose our job. We just bought a home, we have a spouse and 2 kids, and we're about to lose our job next week. But you still got to go and teach your math class tomorrow. That is extremely difficult to do even for an adult who has been trained to separate personal from professional. We still can't do that. So to think that a young person who never has been trained to do such things can do it, it's not realistic. We have to teach them how to do that. So this legacy core piece that's on your screen, this is the first 100 hours of our training. It's breaking them down, kind of boot camp style, and going through character development, giving them emotional intelligence, making sure they understand and how to navigate what's their reality, so that they do not formulate any excuses, they do not allow any barriers that may exist to stop them from ultimately being successful in school and moving on to post-secondary. Once we move through that legacy core piece, which is the behavior modification, there's so many opportunities that they have access to while they're still in high school, whether it's through CTE, whether it's through dual enrollment, any type of partnership with the colleges that allows them to get certain certifications. There's an abundance of those opportunities. But if we look at the demographics of who's taking advantage of that, what we'll find is that so many of these type CTE programs are skill-based by design. You'll start to find that most of the young ladies will move toward the cosmetology or the culinary. Most of the young men will do some of the skilled trades, or they may drop into the culinary. You will not see a lot of the young men doing the healthcare. You won't see a lot of young ladies doing the construction type CTE programs. So there's still, and then by and large, when you look at minority participation, that number is very low. So even though the opportunities exist, there's still a gap on how do we get students to take advantage of what's already right there at their school. This, I can tell you all, is where the industry, having the employers buy into this, becomes so important. Because it's something about a person who is currently doing that job. They're able to articulate it in a way that we can't. There's a passion that they'll speak about it with. There's a way they can excite young people about their profession that if all you're doing is reading from a pamphlet, doesn't come out the same. So having those employers can really help us with engaging students, getting them to see the value of some of the opportunities that we already have in place. The other part with that, when we talk about bringing those employers in, and I would really share this with my educators in the world, if you consider if you just consider the sheer volume of information we have, how well we were able to take concepts and put them into practice because our jobs demand it, many teachers struggle with relevancy in the classroom. And so having our employers engage with our educators, it allows them to work alongside those teachers, kind of bring lesson plans to life, show the teachers how the application of what they're teaching, how real it is. That helps get students excited as well. So this legacy post-training piece is making sure that every student that we work through in the model, they get whatever credential is available to them that's relevant to what they want to do while they're still in high school. That way when they move on to post-secondary, they're going to have some additional skills. They'll be a little bit more prepared. And then for those who are going straight to the industry, then for them that's a benefit as well because they have some additional skills for it. I'm going to move past this slide.